All right, welcome back to another lesson in class. It is super hot outside. Even though I would love to do this outside, it is 96 degrees and I am not about to put myself through that torture. However, we're going to get into lesson 57 of continuation of class. This might rub some people wrong, and being that we went through spirituality and a couple other things, it shouldn't affect you by this point. But if you're just watching this, by all means, don't take it personally. Back up, go ahead and start at lesson one and then catch up. And then maybe you'll understand what's going on in continuing education once you made it through the main course. So, lesson 57 is titled The Accord of the Gods. Now, let's talk about the title for a second, The Accord of the Gods, right? So, what is an accord? It's like a treaty. It's like the Abraham Accord, or if you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, you have the Accords, etc., so on and so forth. It was a type of treaty, right? It was a type of thing that, well, terms were written down, so on and so forth, so that people can, well, live happily and peacefully. So let's get into this. Point number 2. Shared power, how the gods gained power through worship energy. Now, if you read certain history books, there were gods that actually lost their ability when people stopped believing in them. Right? So if you ever heard songs where they're like, oh, I need your negativity so I could feed off your energy, or are you vibing? Oh my God, you got great energy, etc. It's like an an extroverted person and an introverted person, right? An extroverted person gets energy from being outside, introverted from being inside, so on and so forth. Similar concept to the accord of the gods. Remember, during Greek mythology in times of that nature, you had Dionysus, you had Aphrodite, you had Zeus, you had Bacchus, you had Hera, you had a bunch of other people, right? And they gained their ability and their strength through worship energy, right? Or the energy that went into the belief of them. Now, what do I mean, should I say, by the accord of the gods? Well, one, a lot of people would say God is in everyone, right? But then again, you have myth, lore, legend, theology, everything else, and whatever is the gospel truth, depending on what you believe in. Now, what if they decided to share power in a accord structure? So therefore, they removed the S and just left God singular, and then sent messengers out to listen for whom you needed help from. By that way, when people were to pray to God, an architect, a deity, so on and so forth, etc., then they would be able to share that power, similarly to a nuclear power plant generating power and multiple people in a city, village, etc., or state feeding off and sharing that power. Similar concept, but it's with worship energy, right? So you believe in something, you worship it, etc., and you have some type of depiction of what it could or could not be, right? So if we were to take Christianity, you have Jesus, but then in other Christian cultures they have Mary, right? So male or female, right? But whom is it that you're looking to get help from, right? And then of course there's messengers, right? You have the angels in other worlds or belief systems, Greek mythology. You had, who was it, Hermes, right? He was the messenger god, so on and so forth. He would be like in charge of the post office or something like that, right? So you want to understand these things because they probably came down to a determination that, well, not everybody's going to need all of us and our powers are limited, but we would all gain similar abilities, or strength, I should say, if we shared power, right? Like communism, I guess, right? Think about that for a second. That sounds weird, but if they thought that way, and people were giving something to one source, like the nuclear power plant, right? Then everybody would be able to benefit from it, right? So let's continue. Point number 3. Sharing is caring. What happens when the power source leaves, right? So if belief starts to dwindle, starts to disappear, starts to go away in one area, it gives well, more power to other areas, right? If belief in something starts to disappear and it's underneath one thing, well, that one thing might start to disappear. So, how do they bring it back, right? They bring it back through rhetoric, they bring it back through example, they bring it back through show of, well, caring. Right? Because sharing is caring, and in order to get people to care, you have to share your abilities in order to help them, right? So think of it like pulling tips, right? So if you are, here's another analogy, right? If you're a bartender, right? Or a barista, or you do nails or whatever, right? There's a thing called pulling tips where all the tips go into a jar and then you divvy it up evenly. That's what I mean by the accord of the gods. If you watch who is it? Billy Carson and a couple others that dabble in history and lore and mythology and things like that. Even in Hinduism, there's multiple different gods, right? Now, the thing that people normally leave out when it starts to advance because it's a continuation story, right, is the fact that it eventually came down to one thing, right? Just like a president, the Pope, Dalai Lama, etc., right? And so, how do they share this power? One, by emphasizing and respecting each other. That's one. Two, well, by sharing the power, right? And then, of course, when you go into the myth, lore, and legend, Elohim, when they started to discuss it, was plural, but then people started to say it was singular. Why is that? Unless there was an accord that was struck, right? To share power, right? So let's continue. Why is it plural? Why was there an accord? Well, it's simple, right? I mean, if power is leaving and you don't want your family members to disappear, well, then one way to save them would be to, well, share the power, share the abilities, share the resources, right? And from there, you'll be able to all grow, right? Because what's the saying? Rising tides raises all ships, or something like that. But lowering tides does the same. Loose lips sink ships, etc. Let's continue. If you don't understand the accord, then you would not understand NATO or what America is, right? NATO is like a peace treaty, right? I'm pretty sure that's what the T stands for, North Atlantic Treaty, something like that, right? And then, of course, you have an accord, right? The Abraham Accords, right? But what is the United States, right? Well, the United States was supposed to be a neutral ground for all parties to come and visit and learn from each other. That's why when you go to New York City, you have the melting pot. You can visit Ellis Island, the book where the immigrants came in and signed in, so on and so forth. They learn from different cultures around the world because they accept everyone. But then when people get here, they realize that some people don't really accept much. And you have to remember, in history, it was not Columbus, it was Amerigo. Hence, America. And that's why we have North, Central, and South America. A lot of people think it's just the United States when they say America, but it's actually the whole thing. So what are you upset about? Who are you racist against? What are you discriminating? Think about it. Really think about it, right? You can cheer for chaos and beg for it, then complain in times of peace, right? A lot of people get bored and they have too much time on their hands and they want to be nosy. They need something to do because negativity weighs heavily on the mind and in the environment. And if it's, if the brain operates like a keyword research, right? So if I were to say, you know, a lot of things. So for instance, if the brain operates like keyword research, right? And I'm from New York and I say, yo, nigga, what's up? Somebody's going to get triggered, right? Because they want to be fucking nosy. They want to go ahead and say what? Negativity does not weigh on the mind. But if I see a white boy, I say, yo, cracker, what's good? In New York, is different. In the South, they say, oh, bless your heart. In New York, we just say F you to your face. What's with the sweet language? How much time do you have on your hands? You that fucking bored? So you cheer for chaos and beg for it, but then complain in times of peace. Oh, this is so crazy. I'm so stressed out, etc. Sound like a drill instructor or DMX. Which one is it? You're going to criticize somebody by their speech pattern? You know, one could turn into two very quickly. But yet people want to take hindrance or cancel people based upon speech and hope that the Second Amendment doesn't get enacted. You want an example? New York City, a veteran steps in, right? Defends somebody on a train. They don't know how to fucking stop. The guy dies, manslaughter. They criticize the veteran, just like when I was in. Fine, they don't need us. They don't want protection. Let's see if they can protect themselves. Charlotte, North Carolina, on a light rail. White lady gets stabbed. No one to help her. Now what do you think? You want to individually target people. You want to go ahead and target military personnel. Then as a joke, you keep going because you don't know how to stop. Then you go to Target and realize there's a Navy Federal ATM that just popped up. Why? Because there's probably more of us sleeping around here waiting for something to pop off that got informed to come to the area. So please, by all means, continue. Because I tell you right now, your street training, which I got already in New York City, and the military training, which I got already when I went to the Marines, are both two different things. And trust me, people in the military get really excited and happy when they get to do what they do best. I promise you that. And I promise you, if you think it's like Call of Duty, fuck around and find out. Now, mind you, this is for educational purposes, but I need to speak in a certain rhetoric and vernacular for a certain demographic to understand. Right? Because in marketing, you have demographics and psychographics. That's your psychology. And then, of course, your demographic, your age. How old are you? Where are you from? Whatever, etc. What's your culture? Right? Just like the United States has an accord where people are supposed to get along together, but magically decide to work against each other. It's like a barrel of monkeys. They see one climbing and then they want to pull that one down, wonder why they're still all where the hell they're at. Let's continue. How can a group maintain happiness and peace without understanding? I'll say it again. How can a group maintain happiness and peace without understanding if laws are flexible, like morals, and only apply to some? Then there are no laws without those in power rise, and the uninformed stay where they are, or worse. I'll say it again. How can a group maintain happiness and peace without understanding if the laws are flexible like morals and only apply to some? Then there are no laws without those in power rise, and the uninformed stay where they are, or it becomes worse. You hear them getting rid of the middle class. What do you think that does to the lower class or the upper class, right? Those that just made the cut are still at the bottom. Those that just came over look like they're at the top. But when a dog's hungry or an animal is hungry, they're going to find a way to eat. And if you already dictated and showed people that the laws could be flexible and only followed by some, well then, doesn't that open up the door with the very key you used for them to do the same? You guys don't think very often. Some people will say, oh, you ever think too, you ever been told you think too much? And I literally respond, you ever thought that you think too little? Or you don't think enough? See, the stock market applies the accord idea with certain instruments, right? The S&P 500. The S&P 500 has 500 companies in there, or the S&P 1000, the S&P 1500, etc. It's a group of companies that is diversified. They're all different, like the melting pot in New York, like what America once stood for, or should I say the United States. So with the S&P 500, if you were to invest, and even if you were to do your research before you do, look back 5 years, right? This ain't a secret, so I don't need to have 5 on it, right? Go ahead and look back 5 years and look at the growth of the S&P 500. Now compare that to your 401k, compare that to your retirement, compare that to your hustle, etc. I guarantee you it consecutively goes up unless it's around the time of the pandemic. And even then it still made money. By at least 9% growth, right? Now you have compounding interest because, well, you invest every month. So the number in there keeps growing and compounds each month, because not only did it grow based upon interest, like the debt that we have with interest rates, but it works in your favor when you invest in the stock market. And then, of course, from there, you have things like, well, a monthly investment of, let's say, 100 to 150 bucks on top of what you initially started with, on top of the interest, and that interest gets applied to the new number that's in there. What would that growth be? I mean, you have AI now. How is this happening? Unless somebody's stopping you, right? And that's a valid point. Some people don't want people to grow. Some people are comfortable. Some people are lazy, right? Misery loves company. Oh, they're doing better than me? I want them to do good, just not better than me. Or I need something to brag about. Let's move forward. Now, are you starting to see how words influence population? Can you see how words influence population, right? What do I mean by that? Well, did you hear of COVID, right? Before it was COVID, it was called coronavirus, right? Now, granted, this is for educational purposes, but here we go with the education since I mentioned the S&P 500. When coronavirus came out, people thought the Corona beer was giving them the virus. So they had to change the name to COVID. Crazy, I know, but it's true. There ain't no Mandela effect there. So let me get this straight. Because it was called Corona, like mad cow disease, which came from cows, then the Corona beer was giving the virus? That makes no sense, but the stock price got affected. Corporate stepped in. They definitely had to change their ways after that, and the name at least, because it was a hindrance to the company, right? Similarly to what I stated in the beginning. Why would they share power and make it singular? Well, to share power. Because if you knew that it was plural, or you were instructed as such, or it was defined as such, like Greek mythology, well, then you would only go to certain people. And it'd be like dealing with different senators of different states, right? You got what? 2 senators in each state, or a senator in each state, etc. And then, of course, they share the power, the money, the insider trading, whatever that is that they do. I mean, look at social media and YouTube, right? If you don't think words can influence a population, look at the media, right? Go on Google and see what's going on with Facebook, Instagram. What else? Not so much TikTok, AI, right? AI is facing a lawsuit because of vernacular and words, right? Even though it's artificial intelligence. Social media gave people a complex issue, right? In certain things, it stated that the downfall of man would begin when they only cared about themselves, or they only cared about, well, me. Now, what do we have? A selfie camera to take care of what? Pictures? Videos? What I'm doing right now with a selfie? Or security, surveillance, etc. Right? All they have to do is just pitch something the correct way and you fall for it. oh, look at this new feature. You don't have to turn your camera around. You can be lazy and have a selfie camera, right? Now you have a selfie camera, you don't got to turn the thing around. So what does that do? Well, every time you look at your phone, it takes a screenshot. Now that data gets shared because you don't read the policies that are written by attorneys that also have to be read by marketers before we do advertising so we know how to speak to the masses. So let me get this straight. You can take better pictures. You can do this. We upgraded the megapixels, blah, 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 blah. But let's talk about the advertising policy. How do they sell the data? What do they do with your photos, the images, right? You don't think they put that into a database? You don't think that they put that into a surveillance center? I'm sorry. I mean, server center, server farms, right? To store all that data, that information. Smartphones make people stupid, people. Smartphones are dumb phones. Dumb phones are smartphones. Remember, it's backwards. When's the last time you were able to take the battery out of your phone? But yet, when you talk out loud, magically you get commercials for whatever it is that was spoken. And then they can play this little psychological game, right? Oh my God, I was just thinking about that. Oh my God, it's like top of mind, right? Like the top of a funnel, right? I told somebody one time, I said, do you trust me? She said, yes. I said, let's take a picture. Took a picture in front of a Christmas tree of all things. And she got a little slightly upset. I said, why'd you get upset? She goes, oh, now I lost all my friends. I said, don't worry, you gained a lot more friends and a lot better ones. Why is that? Isn't that an evergreen Christmas tree? Isn't it marketing called an evergreen funnel? Aren't you in sales? Madam, I know this is years later, and if you ever get to watch this. So if the marketers speak to the masses that develop the leads for the sales team, do you not think that you have better friends now than the ones that were just doing sales? Now you have friends that are marketers that know how to set up an evergreen funnel. You take an evergreen Christmas tree, turn it upside down, it looks like an upside down triangle, like an evergreen funnel. You have top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Turn it right side up, you put the star on top, it's a Christmas tree, people. So if you don't think words and images can influence, those of you that are in relationships that have a side piece, I dare you to go out and take pictures with your side piece and post it on social media and see how quickly you get found out. You say, no, that's dumb. Why would I do that? You don't think it's not going to influence somebody? Are they not? Or are they going to stay in the relationship? Or better yet, those of you who like to flaunt and bloat money all over the place, go broke. See how many people stay around. Go broke. See if they don't call you crazy. Because remember, in marketing, or in business, I should say, or in psychology, if you're in the medical field, if you're broke, they call you crazy. If you have money past a certain threshold, right? Such as a intelligent investor, if you read Benjamin Graham, they refer to you as eccentric. So if you're broke, you're crazy. And if you're rich or wealthy, you're eccentric. Eccentric sounds better, right? Crazy depends on how you interpret it. Because people need labels sometimes to identify things. For if it wasn't for time, people would go crazy. Let's continue. Speak to them/they like a child, right? Pirates of the Caribbean, etc., right? Remember, I said accord, right? I had someone also mention to me one time as she was standing on the balcony, she said, speak to me as though I'm a child, quoting Margin Call. And if you ever seen the movie Aragon, there was a knight in that movie who was also in Margin Call. He was also a knight in Kingdom of Heaven and well respected. And last time I checked in Margin Call, he sat at the head of the table. Then you had the gentleman that played Spock that was in there. And then you also had the gentleman that played Patrick Jane from The Mentalist that was in there. All very intelligent people, both in real life and the roles that they played. Interesting, a little weird, but interesting. right? In Pirates of the Caribbean, as I mentioned earlier, they had an accord and they had to declare a pirate king who ended up being a female, Miss Elizabeth Swann, right? Then you have things called don't split the difference, right? But the thing is that in Pirates of the Caribbean, every pirate lord or whatever, they were not greedy, but they only thought about themselves and their crew, so they all voted for themselves. It came down to Jack Sparrow, who said Elizabeth Swann. And everybody was shocked because he didn't vote for himself, which meant she won. It's like if my family took a vote and I was like, Mia Ashley. And instead of voting for myself, I just voted for my sister to be the head of the household. Weird, right? Then you have Don't Split the Difference by Chris Voss, FBI negotiator. If there's no differences between pirates, then why was it an issue to pick a lord? Or a pirate king, right? To determine whether or not they were going to go to war or not. Why would it go from plural to singular? Think about it. Even branches of service have an accord like a Honda, okay? So, yes, we bicker, we joke, we yell at each other, etc., but we have an accord. We're not going to purposefully have friendly fire with the Navy, the Marines, the Army, the Air Force, Space Force, Coast Guard, etc. We may be sarcastic, we may joke, we may say stuff, we may, make fun of each other. But think of it like a real round, tight family. We'll fight amongst each other, but the moment another SOB wants to step in, now you have to deal with all of us. And that's a problem, because you should mind your fucking business. Most people don't know how to do that. They want to roll down their window and look to see if it's real. And then when you give them the attention that they want, where is it? They don't respond. It's like, people talk about, oh, Caesar this and Rome and blah, blah, blah. What's funny is that most people don't even understand the books that they read. So then they come out with movies to help them, like Book of Clarence and the Bible. Jesus was flipping tables. They could have prosecuted his ass immediately right then and there. But they didn't. And no one stated anything after such. But yet the second time in front of Pontius Pilate, even the people in the crowd were dictating that that's not him. Now let's go to the Book of Clarence. What was in there that was so profound that should have woke people up? He saw Jesus performing miracles, healing people, and the first thing that came out of his mouth, like some of these doctors out here that are on the tape, or pretend to treat people, or make up tests to double dip in insurance, is, you know how much money we can make with that? And then when he was put on the cross, he said, why did you forsake me? Don't you think that if Jesus wanted to go home and dad called him, he would have said, thank you. I can go back to our house. Thank you for releasing me from this task. Thank you for removing me from this earth-like, human-like suffering. But instead, he said, why did you forsake me? Now, look at the Book of Clarence. Why did Rome turn into the Vatican? Maybe because Jesus, the real one, ended up making a deal, an accord for protection. I'll help heal people and keep people on the right side correctly with order instead of chaos, and you could take care of everybody else that doesn't want to abide by certain things. And my people will help you. Think about it. Why was he not prosecuted the first time, being aggressive, manic, and everything else? But then the second time, charged, people stated it wasn't him, a murderer or killer got off. And he got put to death. Betrayed by a kiss? Really? Or pointed out by one? Like, kiss that motherfucker goodbye. Judas, go take your money. We'll tell everybody you got hung. Nobody's going to dead man tell no tales. You just got paid off. You are set for whatever. Because I don't know what silver, what's it called, went for at that time. But think about it. If he had enough money to leave and escape with the teachings that he got, then all they had to do was, well, fake his death, have him disappear, go somewhere else, start a new life. Nobody's going to search for him. Spread a story that he betrayed somebody. Definitely not going to look for him if he's dead. And then put the impersonator on a cross. Last 2 points. Convert into your vocabulary, and then maybe one will understand. So when people hear me speak, they're like, oh, you're passionate, you're energetic, you're this, you're that, etc. They're trying to put a label to identify it, right? Without asking questions, because they want to be Sherlock Holmes or some shit. And I'm speaking this way because I need to come off to certain individuals that might have been brainwashed into thinking something different without doing their own research. Because if we're all taking a test and everybody got the different tests, so on and so forth, how do you know what answer to put down without saying something? Why don't you raise your hand, ask the teacher, I have a question about question number 6 or question number 5, etc. Now everybody can listen because you're projecting. What does it mean when it says state the question? Because everybody's listening. Is it A, this, B, that, C, this, or D, that? And then the other people that are the real ones, the good ones, etc., that you don't snitch on or rat out, help you get the right answer, as long as you don't dime them out or screw them over. The teacher is there as a proxy. Many people online talk about proxies. And the teacher can't tell you the answer. They could only guide. They didn't say anything about the homeboys and girls in the classroom that are maybe a little bit more educated in certain areas that might be able to assist you. Just say it, right? Remember, I said in New York, we just say F you to your face. In the South, they want to say, oh, bless your heart, or whatever. Think about it, right? In the military, they say cover me. It means to send rounds downrange and to shoot anything that's moving, that's shooting back. In law enforcement or with police and etc., cover me means make sure nobody shoots me and try not to kill anybody. So you have to be very precise in what you're trying to tell somebody when you're speaking to them, because you might not know what you're saying sometimes, including myself. So I ask a lot of questions, sort of, to understand. I'm just more precise with the questions that I ask. So try switching stuff into your own vernacular, your own rhetoric, right? If, for instance, and I talked about the different branches earlier. In the Marines, the way I'm speaking right now would be acceptable. It comes from a drill instructor, but people would say you're not in boot camp. It would come from an instructor that's kicking off a PME or a class. It would come from a superior, whether that be a higher ranking enlisted person or officer, right? They would speak with this gravitas, bravado, or what I like to call conviction, right? In other branches, we have an indoor voice, and we have to sound differently, right? Because some branches aren't used to being spoken to a certain way, right? I remember we got reprimanded twice for speaking to the Army a certain way because they weren't used to being spoken to a certain way. This was during the time of the stress cards. I think the Marines were the only ones that didn't have it, right? With the Air Force, we had to use our library voice. And our library voice was, like this. It was very proper. If anything, I could add an English accent to it. And let me tell you something. They don't like it when you raise your voice. Why? I don't know. But let's hit them with the last ones, and then we can wrap this up. So, last one. Let's see here. Just making sure I got the count right, because this is going to be a great reveal for some of you. Let's see. That's 4. That's 6. 6 and 4 is 10. And this last one would make 12. So emotional control, crowd control, hypnosis, they're all the same thing. Remember, in the last point, I said switch it to your rhetoric, your vernacular, etc. Emotional control would be the words, right? The words, the power of life and death rests upon the tongue. Loosely translated, people would say sticks and stones can never hurt me, or sticks and stones may hurt me, but words never will, or something like that, right? But if you're in a relationship and somebody calls it off, then do those words hurt? Possibly, right? Or you're not trying hard enough, or you're enough, or you're not enough. Psychologically, it's intangible, it's invisible, right? That's emotional control, right? Just like hypnosis, right? I want you to start thinking you're by a lake, you're so on and so forth. You're sticking your feet in the water. The water is cool. As the wind is blowing, it's moving the water past your feet. As the water is moving past your feet, you're realizing a cool sensation, not only at your feet, but raising up through your calves. I want you to close your eyes right now and take a deep breath in. Now exhale. Tell me what you feel as you imagine this in your mind. And then the person tells you. Right? If you listen to a DJ, they have crowd control, right? And you could probably see this if you look up Steve Aoki. Steve Aoki and Afrojack and a couple people, there's something called crowd control, right? They'll play something and it'll be like, everybody to the left, 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 left. And you see everybody jumping up and down, moving to the left, right? Or everybody to the right, right, right. And then everybody's moving to the right, etc., right? Or put your lighters up, right? Everybody put your lighters up. Or everybody put a light up in the air, etc., right? Crowd control, right? It's different vernacular for different verticals, different industries, different areas of practice. But the words are synonyms of each other. Now, you have what? It says here, you see. Do that. Make sure I got this all here. Low. So here's some other examples. So if we have DJs, right? So some people will be like, oh, the Jedi, or DJs, or Jedi was spelt with a D, like DOJ, which is up there somewhat. And then if martial law gets declared, martial law is above them, and it just trumps everybody on down, and they just supersede everybody all of a sudden if that gets declared. But you have DJs, right? Department of Justice, Jedis, etc. Then you have top secret, right? Because at the top you have heaven, right? Heaven is on top, like a secret, etc. Right? As above, so below. But what's Middle Earth? Department of Homeland Security, right? So who presides and watches over the homeland, the middle ground, etc. If that makes sense. And then there's a lot of different entities within the Department of Homeland Security, just like there's not that many, but just as many in the Department of Justice. Then you have the local level. Then you have the military in different branches, right? You have the Navy, which is sea, the Army, which is land, the Air Force, which is air, Space Force, clues in the title, space. Then you have the Marines, air, land, and sea, the clues in the logo, eagle, globe, and anchor, because an eagle flies through the air that watches over the earth that it gets its food from, etc. That everything in that area needs water in order to survive. Then you have lower or below, right? Or blue, right? Because you have water. The water is the color blue, right? And then you have code blue, right? What does that mean? If you ever seen somebody drown, they turn a certain color, code blue. But if they get choked out, they turn red, etc. So with that, I want you to start putting stuff into your own vernacular, right? Because I can say I curse like a sailor, but people will negate that and just hear the phrase and not hear like a sailor. Key word, like. because the Marines are a department of the Navy, which means they hang around Navy people, which means the Navy curses too. And they're pretty much used to this. If you don't believe me, go watch the movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and the man himself, Robert De Niro, right? I think it was called Men of Honor. He does the 12 steps, like a 12-step program, etc., in order to get back into the military. And he speaks to him words that give him life and motivation to move forward. So with this being lesson 57, I decided to put 12 points in there because I've been seeing the numbers 66 and 69 everywhere. And I just want to leave you with this. If you take 57 plus 12, well, 7 and 2 is 9. 5 and 1 is 6. That's 69. And if you speak to an optometrist, we already know about vision because I spoke about that in another lesson. We could flip that 9 and it could be 66. It's weird, right? But awesome at the same time. So I'm going to leave you with that. I hope you guys enjoyed lesson 57 of class, continuing education, the accord of the gods, talking about shared power and everything else. And I can't wait for lesson 58. Till next time, my friends. Peace. Mwah. I love you. God bless. Goodbye.